The cold December wind cut through the streets like a knife, but David Chen barely noticed. His mind was somewhere else entirely, racing through tomorrow's board meeting, next week's product launch, and the dozen emails still waiting in his inbox. Christmas Eve had become just another day to him, another checkbox on an endless list of obligations. He adjusted the shopping bags hanging from both arms, designer labels peeking out from expensive wrapping paper. Guilt shopping, his sister called it. But what else could he do? His daughter needed things, didn't she? New clothes, the latest gadgets, toys she'd mentioned once or twice. If he couldn't be there, at least he could provide. That's what a good father did, right? The luxury shopping district was starting to empty out. Families hurried past him, children tugging at their parents' hands, faces bright with excitement. David looked away. Those scenes hurt in ways he couldn't quite name. They reminded him of everything he'd lost, everything he was failing to give his 8-year-old daughter. 3 years. It had been 3 years since cancer had stolen his wife away, leaving him alone with a 5-year-old who kept asking when Mommy was coming home. 3 years of drowning in work because home felt like a museum of memories he couldn't bear to face. 3 years of telling himself that building a successful company was the best thing he could do for his daughter's future. The snow started falling heavier now, soft white flakes that melted on his dark overcoat. David paused at the corner, shifting the bags to check his phone. Another message from the nanny. Bedtime had gone smoothly. His daughter was asking about him. She wanted to know when Daddy would be home. Tomorrow, he typed back. Always tomorrow. That's when he saw her. She wasn't like the other homeless people he usually passed without a second glance. She wasn't holding a sign or shaking a cup. She was simply sitting against the brick wall of a closed boutique, her thin coat pulled tight around her shoulders. Her head was tilted back against the wall, eyes closed as if she was resting or maybe just trying to disappear. Something made David stop. Maybe it was the way she sat so still while the world rushed around her. Maybe it was the fact that she looked about his age, someone who probably had a completely different life before ending up here. Or maybe it was just that for the first time in hours, he actually saw another human being instead of just moving through his own bubble of thoughts. Their eyes met as she opened them, green eyes surprisingly bright against her weathered face. There was no expectation in them, no plea. Just a quiet awareness like she was looking through him instead of at him. "Merry Christmas," David heard himself say. The words felt awkward in his mouth, like a language he'd forgotten how to speak. She studied him for a long moment, and something shifted in her expression. It wasn't quite sadness, but something deeper. Understanding, maybe. Or pity. "Your daughter doesn't need those bags," she said quietly. Her voice was rough but clear. "She needs you home." She told me so herself. David's entire body went rigid. The shopping bag suddenly felt heavy as stones. His heart started pounding in his chest, that fight-or-flight response kicking in hard. "What did you just say?" "Your daughter," the woman repeated, looking directly at him now. "She needs her father more than she needs presents." "How do you know I have a daughter?" David's voice came out sharper than he intended. His mind was racing through possibilities, none of them good. Was this some kind of scam? Had this woman been following him? Did she somehow know who he was? Tech millionaires were targets. He'd always been careful, always protected his family's privacy. But maybe not careful enough. Maybe this woman had been watching his house. Maybe she'd seen his daughter at school. The thought made his stomach turn. "I've never met her," the woman said, and there was something in her tone that made David pause. She sounded tired, resigned, like she was confessing to something she didn't want to admit. "But I know things sometimes. Things I shouldn't know." That's not an answer. David stepped closer, despite every instinct telling him to walk away.
"You need to tell me how you know about my daughter."
"Right now." The woman looked away, staring at the falling snow. For a moment, David thought she might not respond at all. Then she spoke again, and her words hit him like a physical blow. "She has a stuffed rabbit, gray with one ear that's more worn than the other because she holds it when she sleeps. She's had it since she was tiny. She calls it Hoppy." David felt the blood drain from his face. Hoppy. His wife had bought that rabbit at a craft fair when his daughter was 2 years old. It had been her constant companion ever since, dragged everywhere, loved until its fur was matted and thin. Nobody outside their family knew about Hoppy. He'd never posted it on social media. The nanny wouldn't have told strangers. It was impossible that this woman knew. "She has nightmares," the woman continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "Dreams about losing someone in a crowd. She wakes up scared and calls for you, but you're not there. She's been having them for months. David couldn't breathe. The nightmares had started 6 months ago. His daughter would wake up crying, convinced she'd lost him in some crowded place. The nanny had mentioned it, suggested maybe he should talk to a child therapist. He'd meant to. He'd put it on his list. But there was always something more urgent, always another crisis at work that needed his attention. "Who are you?" he managed to ask. "What is this? Some kind of trick?" "I'm nobody," the woman said, and she sounded so genuinely sad that David's anger faltered. "Just someone who sees things, feels things. I don't want to. I didn't ask for it. But when I looked at you walking past, loaded down with expensive bags and misery, I saw her, your little girl, drawing pictures of you at her desk, wondering when Daddy's coming home." The shopping bag slipped from David's hands, landing in the slush at his feet. His daughter drew pictures of him. He knew that. He had a few pinned up in his office, stick figures holding hands under bright suns. But he'd never thought about what it meant that she drew them at school during the day, when he should have been present in her life instead of just in her imagination. "This isn't possible," he said, but his voice had lost its edge. "People can't just know things like that." "I know," the woman replied. "Believe me, I know. Do you think I wanted to end up here, knowing too much about strangers, seeing into people's pain? It cost me everything, my career, my family, everything." David stood there in the falling snow, his perfectly ordered world suddenly feeling very fragile. This was insane. Completely insane. He should walk away right now, call his security team, make sure his daughter was safe. But something kept him rooted to the spot. Maybe it was the accuracy of what this woman had said. Maybe it was the lack of threat in her voice, the absence of any demand for money or attention. Or maybe it was simply that she'd voiced the truth he'd been running from for 3 years. His daughter needed him, and he'd been too afraid to be there. David found himself doing something he never did, something that went against every rule he'd set for himself about strangers, about safety, about maintaining the careful walls he'd built around his life. He sat down on the cold pavement next to this woman who somehow knew his deepest secrets. The concrete was freezing through his expensive suit pants, and he could feel the dampness seeping in. But he didn't move. People walked past them, shooting curious glances at the well-dressed man sitting beside a homeless woman on Christmas Eve. David didn't care. For the first time in 3 years, something had cracked through the numbness he'd been living in. "I don't understand any of this," he said quietly. "You're telling me you just see things? About people you've never met?" The woman nodded slowly, pulling her thin coat tighter. "It started about 4 years ago. Little things at first. I'd meet someone and just know their dog had died, or their mother was sick. I thought I was just intuitive, you know? Good at reading people. I was a therapist, a child psychologist. Being perceptive was part of my job." David turned to look at her properly. A therapist. That explained the calm way she spoke, the lack of judgment in her voice. But it didn't explain how she'd ended up here. Then it got stronger. She continued, staring at the snow falling in front of them. "I'd touch someone's hand and suddenly know things about their childhood. See flashes of their memories. Feel their pain like it was my own. At first it helped my patients. I could understand them in ways I never had before. But then I started knowing things I shouldn't. Things they hadn't told me. Things they'd hidden from everyone." "What happened?" David asked, even though part of him wasn't sure he wanted to know. "I made the mistake of being honest about it," she said with a bitter laugh. "I told my husband first. He thought I was having a breakdown. Then I mentioned something to a colleague, something I'd seen about a patient that wasn't in any file. They reported me, said I was accessing confidential information inappropriately, making things up, losing my grip on reality." She pulled her knees up to her chest, making herself smaller. "I tried to explain, tried to prove it. But how do you prove something like this? I couldn't control it. Couldn't predict when it would happen. Every test they gave me, I failed. Or passed, depending on how you look at it. Either way, I lost my license, lost my practice. My husband left and took our son with him. Said I was unstable, unsafe to be around our child." David felt a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. "Your son? He's 12 now. I haven't seen him in 2 years. The court agreed with my ex-husband. Said my delusions made me an unfit mother." Her voice cracked slightly. "They weren't delusions. But try explaining that to a judge." They sat in silence for a moment. David's mind was reeling, trying to process everything. Part of him still wanted to believe this was all some elaborate con, some street performer's trick. But the pain in her voice was too real. The specific details about his daughter too accurate. "So you ended up here," he finally said. "So I ended up here," she echoed. "Couldn't get another job. Couldn't get references. My family thought I was crazy. Friends stopped calling. I burned through my savings trying to fight the custody case. And the visions just kept coming, stronger and stronger. Sometimes I can't tell the difference between what's mine and what belongs to other people. It's like living with a radio you can't turn off, constantly picking up other people's broadcasts." David thought about his own losses, his own pain. He'd thought he had it bad. Losing his wife had nearly destroyed him. But at least he still had his daughter, his career, his home. This woman had lost everything, and unlike him, she hadn't chosen her isolation. It had been forced on her by something she couldn't control. "Why did you tell me?" he asked. "About my daughter. You could have just let me walk past." She turned to look at him, and in the glow of the streetlights her eyes looked almost luminous. "Because sometimes the knowing is so loud I can't ignore it. When you walked by, I felt your daughter's loneliness like a weight on my chest. 8 years old and already learning that love means absence. Already believing that if she's just good enough, quiet enough, needs little enough, maybe you'll want to come home." Each word landed like a punch. David wanted to argue, to defend himself. He provided for his daughter. She had everything she needed. The best schools, the best nanny, a trust fund that would set her up for life. But even as he tried to form the words, he knew they were hollow. "I work hard for her," he said, but it sounded weak even to his own ears. "I'm building something. Security for her future." "She doesn't need security," the woman said gently. "She needs her father. She needs someone to help her with homework and ask about her day and notice when she's sad. She needs someone to be there when she wakes up from nightmares instead of an employee you pay to care." "The nanny is good to her," David protested. "I'm sure she is, but she's not you. And your daughter knows the difference." The woman shifted, wincing slightly as if her joints ached. "I see it all the time out here. People rushing past loaded down with things they think will fill the holes in their lives. Toys instead of time, money instead of presence. They think they're doing the right thing, working hard, providing, but their kids are at home counting the hours until someone actually sees them." David felt his throat tighten. "My wife died. I didn't know how to be alone with our daughter. Everything reminded me of her. Every room in our house, every routine, every bedtime story. I couldn't breathe there. Work was the only place that didn't hurt." "I know," the woman said softly. "I can feel that too. The grief is like a wall around you, so thick nothing gets through. But your daughter lost her mother too. And then she lost you as well, just in a different way. She's been grieving alone while you grieve at the office." The truth of it hit David like a wave. All this time, he'd thought he was protecting his daughter from his pain, shielding her from his grief. But really, he'd just been protecting himself. It was easier to buy presents than to face bedtime without his wife there. Easier to work late than to sit at a dinner table that felt too empty. Easier to become a provider than to remain a father. "She drew a picture last week," the woman continued, her voice distant, as if she was seeing something David couldn't. "You weren't in it. Just her and the rabbit and an empty chair. When her teacher asked about it, she said Daddy was at work." Like that explained everything. Like that was just the way things were. David's hands were shaking. He clasped them together, pressing them against his knees. "How do you see these things? How is any of this possible?" "I don't know," she admitted. "I've stopped trying to understand it. Doctors couldn't explain it. Psychologists called it delusion. Religious people said I was cursed or blessed, depending on who you asked. All I know is that it's real. It's ruined my life, and sometimes it lets me see what people are too scared to admit to themselves." "And what do you see when you look at me?" David asked, not sure he wanted the answer. She was quiet for a long moment, studying his face. "I see a man who's terrified. Terrified of losing more than he already has. So scared of feeling the pain that he's chosen not to feel anything at all. And I see a little girl who's starting to believe she's not worth coming home to." David closed his eyes. The snow fell around them, soft and relentless, covering the dirty street in temporary white. Somewhere in the distance, church bells rang out for midnight Christmas service. Peace on earth, goodwill to men. But David felt no peace. Only the slow, dawning realization that he'd been running in the wrong direction all along. David sat there in the snow, feeling like his carefully constructed world was crumbling around him. This stranger had done in 10 minutes what 3 years of therapy couldn't do. She'd made him see the truth he'd been hiding from. "I don't even know your name," he said finally, his voice rough. "Catherine," she replied, "though most people out here just call me Cat. I'm David." He extended his hand, then felt foolish. But Catherine took it without hesitation. The moment their hands touched, she flinched slightly, and David wondered what she was seeing now. What other failures and fears she could read in him like an open book. She let go quickly. "You're thinking about getting up and walking away, telling yourself this is crazy, that I'm crazy, that you'll just forget this conversation and go back to your life." David couldn't even deny it. That was exactly what he'd been thinking. "But you won't," Catherine continued, "because deep down you know everything I've said is true. And you're tired, David. So tired of running from your own life." He was tired, exhausted in a way that sleep never fixed. The kind of tired that came from holding yourself together every single day, from pretending that everything was fine when nothing was fine at all. "What am I supposed to do?" he asked, and he hated how helpless he sounded. "I can't just stop working. I have responsibilities. A company. Employees depending on me." "I'm not saying quit your job," Catherine said. "I'm saying stop hiding in it. There's a difference between working hard and using work as an escape. You know which one you've been doing." David thought about his office. The sleek desk, the wall of windows overlooking the city, the awards and framed articles about his success. He'd spent more time in that room than anywhere else in the past 3 years. It was his fortress, his refuge. But Catherine was right. It was also his hiding place. "She asked the nanny last week if you still loved her," Catherine said quietly. "Your daughter. She wanted to know if maybe you stayed away because she'd done something wrong." God. David put his head in his hands. "She asked that? Children always blame themselves." "It's how their minds work. They can't understand adult grief, adult complications. They just know that mommy's gone and daddy's never home. And somewhere in their small logic, it must be because of something they did." David felt tears burning behind his eyes. He couldn't remember the last time he'd cried. Not at his wife's funeral, not during the long nights after. He'd locked it all away, pushed it down, kept moving forward because stopping meant feeling everything he couldn't handle feeling. "I loved my wife so much," he whispered. "Losing her broke something in me. I look at our daughter and I see her everywhere. The same smile. The same way she tilts her head when she's thinking. How am I supposed to sit across from that every day and not fall apart?" "By remembering that your daughter sees it too," Catherine said. "She looks in the mirror and sees her mother. And then she looks around and her father's gone too. She's 8 years old and she's already lost both parents, just in different ways." The words cut deep because they were true. He'd been so focused on his own pain that he'd never really considered what his absence must feel like to his daughter. She'd lost her mother and then watched her father disappear into work, into meetings, into anything that kept him away from home. "I don't know how to be around her without my wife there," David admitted. "We were a team. She knew what to do, what to say. I just followed her lead. Now I'm supposed to do it alone and I don't know how." "Nobody knows how," Catherine said. "That's what being a parent is. Making it up as you go, doing your best, messing up and trying again. Your wife didn't have a manual either. She just showed up and figured it out. That's all your daughter needs from you. Just show up." David looked at Catherine, really looked at her. Here was a woman who'd lost her own child. Not to death, but to circumstances just as cruel. She was sitting on a frozen street on Christmas Eve, with nothing and no one. And she was trying to help him see what he still had before it was too late. "Why are you helping me?" he asked. "You don't know me. You have your own problems." Catherine smiled sadly. "Maybe that's exactly why. I can't fix my own life. I can't see my son. I can't go back to who I was before all this started. But maybe I can stop someone else from making the same mistakes I see people make every day. Maybe that's the only good thing that can come from this curse." "It doesn't seem fair," David said. "What happened to you? Losing everything because of something you can't control." "Life isn't fair," Catherine replied with a shrug. "I learned that the hard way. But you still have choices, David. You can still choose to be present. I don't have that option anymore. My ex-husband made sure of that. But you do. Your daughter is right there waiting for you. Don't waste it." They sat in silence for a while, watching the snow fall and the last few shoppers hurry home to their families. David thought about his daughter, probably asleep by now, clutching Hoppy and dreaming whatever dreams 8-year-olds had. He thought about all the nights he'd missed, all the dinners and bedtimes and small moments that seemed unimportant, but were actually everything. "What would you do?" he finally asked. "If you could see your son again, what would you do differently?" Catherine's eyes glistened.
Everything.
"I'd do everything differently. I wouldn't work late. I wouldn't check my phone during dinner. I wouldn't take a single second for granted. I'd memorize his laugh and the way he says my name and the questions he asks about the world. I'd be there, really there, not just physically present but actually engaged, because now I know how fast it can all disappear." Her voice cracked on the last word and David felt his own chest tighten. Here was the weight of real loss, real regret. He still had time. He still had chances. But time was running out faster than he wanted to admit. His daughter was 8 now. Soon she'd be 10, then 12, then 15. Soon she'd be grown and gone, and all these missed years would be just empty space where memories should have been. "I need to change," David said, and saying it out loud made it feel real. "I need to actually be her father again." "Yes," Catherine agreed simply. "You do, but I don't know where to start. It's been so long. What if she's angry with me? What if it's already too late? It's never too late. Not while you're both still here, still breathing, still able to try." Catherine pulled herself to her feet, wincing as her stiff joints protested. "Start tomorrow. Christmas morning. Don't just give her presents. Give her your time, your attention, your actual presence. See what happens." David stood up too, suddenly aware of how cold he was, how wet his clothes had gotten, but more than that he was aware of a strange feeling he hadn't experienced in years. Hope, maybe, or determination, or just the simple clarity that comes from finally admitting you've been going in the wrong direction. "Come with me," he said suddenly. "Let me get you a hotel room for tonight. A warm bed, a meal. It's Christmas." Catherine looked at him carefully. "I don't want your money, David. That's not why I told you these things." "I know, but let me do this anyway. Please. You've given me something tonight, something I didn't even know I needed. Let me give you a warm night in return." She hesitated, and David could see the pride warring with exhaustion in her face. Finally, she nodded. "Just for tonight. Just because it's Christmas." They walked together through the empty streets, an unlikely pair, the millionaire and the homeless woman who could see too much. David arranged a room at a nearby hotel, left money for meals, and gave Catherine his business card. "If you need anything," he said. "Call me, I mean it." Catherine pocketed the card but didn't make any promises. "Go home tomorrow. Be with your daughter. That's all the thanks I need." As David finally headed home, his mind was racing. Everything felt different somehow. The streets looked clearer. The world felt more real. And for the first time in 3 years, he wasn't thinking about work or meetings or the next big deal. He was thinking about a little girl with a worn stuffed rabbit, waiting for her father to come home. David didn't sleep that night. He sat in his penthouse apartment, surrounded by expensive furniture and designer everything, and all of it felt hollow, empty, like he'd been living in a showroom instead of a home. Around 3 in the morning, he walked down the hall to his daughter's room. He hadn't done this in months, maybe longer. The nanny handled bedtime, handled the nightmares, handled everything. He stood in the doorway, watching the small shape under the blankets, listening to her breathe. The room was exactly as his wife had decorated it 3 years ago. Soft yellow walls, white furniture, shelves full of books and toys. Nothing had changed, but everything had changed. The little girl sleeping there had grown from 5 to 8 without him really noticing. How many inches had she grown? How many teeth had she lost? What were her favorite subjects in school now? He didn't know. He didn't know any of it. He stepped closer and saw Hoppy clutched in her arms, just like Catherine had described. One ear more worn than the other. The gray fur matted from years of love. His wife had bought that rabbit at a small craft fair, back when they'd been a family. Back when weekends meant pancakes and park visits and nothing more complicated than deciding which movie to watch. David sat carefully on the edge of the bed, and his daughter stirred. Her eyes opened slowly, confused at first, then wide with surprise. "Daddy?" Her voice was small, uncertain, like she wasn't sure if she was dreaming. "Hey, baby," David whispered, his throat tight. "I'm here. Why aren't you at work?" She sat up, rubbing her eyes, and David's heart broke a little more. That was her first question. Not excitement that he was there, but confusion about why he wasn't somewhere else. It's very late at night, sweetheart. Or very early in the morning, depending on how you look at it. I just wanted to check on you. She looked at him for a long moment, studying his face like she was trying to memorize it. Are you going away again? What do you mean? Like Mommy. She went away and didn't come back. Are you going away too? David felt like someone had punched him in the chest. No, baby, no, I'm not going anywhere. I'm right here. But you're always at work, she said, matter of fact. Miss Rachel says you work very hard to take care of me. She says that's why you can't be home. Miss Rachel, the nanny, making excuses for him, trying to help his daughter understand why her father was never there, and his daughter had accepted it, had learned to make peace with his absence because what other choice did an 8-year-old have? I do work hard, David said slowly, but Miss Rachel is wrong about something. I don't need to be gone as much as I have been. I've been making bad choices and I'm sorry. His daughter tilted her head just like his wife used to do. What kind of bad choices? I've been sad since Mommy died. Really, really sad. And instead of being sad at home with you, I went to work and stayed busy so I wouldn't have to feel it. But that was wrong. Because you've been sad too, and I left you alone with that sadness. She was quiet, processing this with the serious expression children get when adults tell them hard truths. Then she said something that nearly undid him completely. I thought you stayed away because I made you sad. Because I look like Mommy and it hurts you to see me. Oh God, no. David pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. No, sweetheart. You don't make me sad. You're the best thing in my whole life. Looking at you should make me happy. And I'm so sorry I made you think anything different. She hugged him back, her small arms around his neck, and David realized he couldn't remember the last time he'd held her like this. Really held her. Not just a quick goodbye hug on his way out the door. She felt bigger than he remembered growing up without him noticing. I miss you, Daddy, she whispered into his shoulder. Even when you're home, you're on your phone or your computer. It's like you're not really here. She was right. Even the rare evenings he was home, he was mentally still at work. Checking emails, taking calls, half listening while his mind ran through spreadsheets and presentations. Present in body, but absent in every way that mattered. That's going to change, David said firmly. Starting right now. Starting this Christmas. I'm going to be here. Really here. And I know I've messed up a lot and it might take time for you to believe me, but I promise I'm going to try. Really? She pulled back to look at him, hope and skepticism fighting in her expression. She'd learned not to trust empty promises. Really? In fact, how about we do something today? Just you and me. Whatever you want. But what about all the presents downstairs? Don't you want me to open them? David thought about the mountain of wrapped boxes under their designer tree. Guilt gifts, every single one. Things he'd bought because he thought that's what fathers did. Provide, purchase, present. But Catherine had been right. His daughter didn't need more things. The presents will be there later, he said. Right now, I want to know what you'd like to do if you could do anything in the world today. She thought about it seriously, and David could see her trying to figure out if this was real or just another disappointment waiting to happen. Finally, she said, could we make breakfast together? Like we used to with Mommy? Pancakes with chocolate chips? Something so simple, so small. And he'd been too busy to give her even that. Yes, he said. Absolutely yes. What else? Could we go to the park? Even though it's cold? I want to show you how high I can swing now. I've gotten really good. The park sounds perfect. And could we maybe look at Mommy's pictures? The ones in the albums? Miss Rachel says they make you too sad, but I like looking at them. I don't want to forget what she looked like. David's eyes burned. The photo albums. He'd packed them away months after his wife died, unable to look at her face without falling apart. He'd thought he was protecting himself, protecting his daughter from his grief. But he'd been erasing his wife instead, trying to pretend that not seeing her image would make the loss hurt less. We'll look at every single picture, he promised, and I'll tell you stories about Mommy that you might not remember. Would you like that? She nodded eagerly, and there was a light in her eyes that David hadn't seen in so long. Simple happiness. The pure joy of a child who was getting what she actually needed, what she'd been missing. Time. Attention. Her father. They made pancakes as the sun came up and David was terrible at it. He burned the first batch and forgot the chocolate chips in the second. But his daughter laughed, actually laughed, as they tried to flip them and ended up with batter on the ceiling. The penthouse kitchen, always so pristine and unused, became messy and wonderful. They ate their imperfect pancakes and talked. Really talked. She told him about school, about her best friend who'd moved away, about a bully who'd been mean but then became nice, about a project on ocean animals where she'd chosen dolphins. David listened to every word like it was the most important thing he'd ever heard, because it was. Later, they bundled up and went to the park. The Christmas morning streets were quiet, most families still inside with their own celebrations. David pushed his daughter on the swings, and she was right. She could go so high now. When had she learned that? He'd missed it. He'd missed so much. "Watch this, Daddy," she called, and she jumped off the swing at the height of the arc, landing in the snow with a triumphant laugh. That was amazing. David cheered, and he meant it. His daughter was brave and strong and growing up, and he was finally there to see it. They built a snowman, even though neither of them really knew how. It ended up lopsided with a carrot nose. That kept falling off, but they took a picture with it anyway. His daughter's first request to use his phone, to take a memory and save it. David looked at that photo later, at both their smiling faces, and realized he couldn't remember the last picture he'd taken that wasn't a work event or a business function. In the afternoon, they sat together on the couch with the photo albums David had hidden away. His daughter curled against his side, pointing at pictures and asking questions. Who was that? Where were we? What was Mommy saying? And David told her everything he could remember, bringing his wife back to life through stories. "Mommy loved you so much," he said, looking at a picture of his wife pregnant, her hand on her belly, her face glowing with joy. "She used to talk to you before you were born. She'd tell you about all the things you'd do together, all the places you'd go. She had so many plans." "Do you think she's sad she missed them?" his daughter asked quietly. "I think she's sad she's not here," David said honestly. "But I think she'd be happy that we're together right now, remembering her. And I think she'd want us to make new plans, new memories, not instead of her but because of her, because she loved us and would want us to be happy." His daughter thought about this, then said something wise beyond her years. "Miss Rachel says Mommy is always with us, in our hearts. But I think she's with us in other ways too, like when I see something beautiful and I know Mommy would have liked it, or when I laugh really hard and I remember how Mommy used to laugh too." "You're right," David said, pulling her closer. "She's with us in all those ways. And I've been so scared of the sadness that I forgot about all the love that's still here." They spent the whole day together, and David didn't check his phone once. Didn't think about work, about meetings, about anything except this moment with his daughter. And somewhere around dinner time, when they were making grilled cheese sandwiches, and his daughter was telling him about a dream she'd had about flying, David realized something profound. He'd been so busy building a future for his daughter that he'd forgotten to give her a present, and all she'd ever wanted was him. The day after Christmas, David went looking for Catherine. He'd thought about her all through Christmas Day, wondering if she was warm, if the hotel room had been enough, if she was okay. But more than that, he wanted to thank her properly, to tell her that she'd changed something fundamental in him. He went back to the corner where they'd met, but she wasn't there. He asked other people on the street if they'd seen her. Some shook their heads. Others looked at him with suspicion, probably wondering why a man in an expensive coat was asking about a homeless woman. One older man said he'd seen her around but hadn't spotted her in a couple days. David tried the hotel, but they said she'd checked out early that morning. No forwarding information, no note. Just gone, like she'd never been there at all. Over the next few weeks, David searched. He drove through the areas where homeless people gathered, looked in shelters, asked social workers. He hired a private investigator who came back with nothing. Catherine had simply vanished. No records, no trail, nothing. It was like she'd been a ghost, appearing just long enough to deliver a message before disappearing back into whatever mysterious place she'd come from. Part of David wondered if he'd imagined the whole thing. But he knew he hadn't. The changes in his life were too real. The way his daughter smiled more. The way their house felt like a home again. The way he'd completely restructured his work life to make room for what actually mattered. He'd done what Catherine suggested. He'd shown up, really shown up. He started working from home 3 days a week, arranging his schedule around his daughter's life instead of the other way around. He was there for breakfast every morning, there for homework every afternoon, there for bedtime every night. And slowly, day by day, his daughter started to trust that he wasn't going to disappear again. The nightmares stopped. That was the first change David noticed. His daughter slept through the night, no longer waking up terrified of losing him in some imaginary crowd. And when she did wake up, it was often to crawl into his bed just wanting to be close, making up for all the closeness they'd lost. They developed new routines. Saturday morning pancakes became their tradition. Sometimes they were good, sometimes they were disasters, but they were always together. They played board games on Sunday afternoons. They read books before bed, taking turns with chapters, making up funny voices for characters. Simple things, normal things. The things David had been too busy to do for 3 years. His business partners thought he'd lost his mind. Taking afternoons off, working from home, missing meetings for school events. But David's assistant noticed something interesting. Despite working fewer hours, David was making better decisions. His mind was clearer. His stress levels were down. He was more creative, more focused when he was actually working because he wasn't carrying around the weight of guilt and grief anymore. 6 months passed. David and his daughter were in a good place, better than they'd been since his wife died. They'd learned to talk about their feelings, to share their sadness when it came, to celebrate the good moments without feeling guilty for being happy. They were healing together instead of separately. But David couldn't stop thinking about Catherine, about what she'd lost, about how she'd saved his family while having no way to save her own. One evening, his daughter was drawing at the kitchen table while he made dinner. She'd gotten really into art lately, constantly sketching and coloring. He glanced over and saw she was drawing a woman with kind eyes. "Who's that?" he asked. "I don't know," she said, tilting her head. "I had a dream about her last night. She was smiling at me and telling me that everything was going to be okay. She seemed nice." David moved closer to look at the drawing and his heart stopped. Green eyes, the same gentle expression. It was Catherine. He was sure of it. But he'd never told his daughter about that night. Never mentioned the homeless woman who'd changed everything. There was no way she could know what Catherine looked like. Unless Catherine's gift worked both ways. Unless she'd somehow reached out, wanting to know if her words had made a difference. "She does seem nice," David said quietly, his mind racing. That night after his daughter was asleep, David made a decision. If he couldn't find Catherine, if he couldn't repay her directly, then he'd honor what she'd tried to teach him in a different way. He'd make sure her message reached other people. That other families didn't have to lose what he'd almost lost. He started with something small. A foundation. Not a big flashy charity with his name on it, but something that actually helped. He called it Hope House, thinking of his daughter's rabbit, thinking of the hope Catherine had given him when he'd needed it most. The foundation focused on 2 things. First, supporting homeless individuals, especially those struggling with mental health issues or circumstances beyond their control. People like Catherine, who'd lost everything through no fault of their own. Second, providing resources for grieving families, helping parents and children navigate loss together instead of separately. David threw himself into it the way he'd once thrown himself into work, but this time it was different. This time his daughter was involved too. They volunteered together at shelters, serving meals and talking to people. His daughter was nervous at first, but David taught her what Catherine had taught him. That everyone had a story. That circumstances could change in an instant. That the person on the street could just as easily be a former therapist, a teacher, a parent who'd hit hard times. They met people who reminded David of Catherine. People who'd once had everything and now had nothing. People with haunted eyes who'd seen too much pain. And David listened to all of them. Really listened. The way Catherine had listened to him that Christmas Eve. One day, about a year after their encounter, David was at the Foundation's new shelter location. They just opened it. A place that offered not just beds and meals but counseling, job training, and medical care. He was talking to the staff when one of the volunteers approached him. "There's someone asking for you," she said. She wouldn't give her name, but she said you'd want to see her. David's heart jumped. Could it be, after all this time? He followed the volunteer to the common area and stopped in his tracks. It was Catherine. She looked different, cleaner, her hair cut and brushed, wearing donated clothes that actually fit. But it was definitely her. Those green eyes were unmistakable. "I heard about this place," Catherine said quietly. "Heard about a foundation started by a man who wanted to help people like me. I had a feeling it might be you." "I've been looking for you," David said, "for months. I wanted to thank you, to tell you that you were right about everything." "I know," Catherine said with a small smile. "I saw it. Not in a vision exactly, but more like a feeling. I could sense that something had shifted, that you'd found your way back. You saved my family," David said simply. "You saved me from losing the only thing that really mattered. How can I ever repay that?" Catherine looked around the shelter, at the people being helped, at the resources being offered. "You already have. This place, what you're doing here, it's exactly what people like me need. Not just a bed for the night, but actual support, understanding, a chance to rebuild." "Stay," David said impulsively. "Please, let us help you. We have counselors, resources. Maybe we can help you get back on your feet, help you reconnect with your son." Catherine's eyes filled with tears. "I've tried before. It never works. The court orders, the restrictions. My ex-husband made sure I'd never see him again." "Let me try something," David said. "I know lawyers, good ones. And maybe with the right support, with documentation that you're stable and getting help. Maybe things could change. No promises, but let me try. You gave me a second chance with my daughter. Let me help you get a second chance with your son." For the first time since David had met her, Catherine looked hopeful. Actually hopeful. "You'd do that for me?" "You did more for me than you'll ever know," David replied. "You reminded me what actually matters. And if there's any way I can help you get back even a piece of what you lost, I'm going to try." Catherine stayed. She moved into the transitional housing connected to the shelter. She started seeing the counselors, working with the doctors who specialized in unusual neurological conditions. They couldn't explain her abilities, couldn't make them go away, but they helped her develop strategies for managing them. For living with a gift that had felt like a curse, David's lawyers took her case. It was a long shot, they warned. But they'd try, and slowly, very slowly, things started to move forward. Evaluations, hearings, small steps toward the possibility that Catherine might someday see her son again. David's daughter asked about Catherine, curious about the woman who sometimes helped at the shelter. David told her the truth, that Catherine was a special person who'd helped their family when they needed it most. That sometimes angels came in unexpected forms, appearing exactly when you needed them, saying exactly what you needed to hear. 2 years after that Christmas Eve encounter, David stood in his home with his daughter beside him. They were hosting a small celebration. Catherine had just had her first supervised visit with her son in over 4 years. It had only been an hour, just lunch at a neutral location with social workers present. But it was a start, a crack in the wall that had separated them. Hope for something more. Catherine arrived with tears streaming down her face, but she was smiling. "He's gotten so tall," she kept saying. "He's 12 now and he's taller than me, and he remembered me." He actually remembered me. David's daughter hugged Catherine without hesitation, the way children do when they recognize kindness. And David thought about how far they'd all come, how a chance meeting on a snowy street had changed multiple lives in ways none of them could have predicted. That night, as he tucked his daughter into bed, she asked him something she'd asked many times before.
"Daddy, do you think Mommy can see us from heaven?"
"I think she can," David said, brushing her hair back. "And I think she's proud of who we've become, of how we're helping other people, of how we found our way back to each other." "Do you think she sent Catherine to us?" his daughter asked. Like a message. David thought about it. The impossible knowledge, the perfect timing, the way Catherine had appeared and then vanished only to return exactly when they'd been ready to help her in return. "Maybe she did," he said finally. "Or maybe the universe works in mysterious ways. Or maybe Catherine was just a very special person who saw something that needed fixing and found the courage to speak up. I don't know which it is. But I know I'm grateful." His daughter yawned, clutching Hoppy close. "Me too, Daddy. I'm grateful you came home." "So am I, baby," David whispered. So am I. And as he turned off the light and closed the door, David thought about that homeless woman on Christmas Eve. The one who'd said words that shocked him, challenged him, changed him. The one who'd reminded him that the greatest wealth wasn't measured in money or success, but in presence. In showing up. In being there for the people who needed you most. He'd been a millionaire who'd lost sight of what really mattered. She'd been a woman who'd lost everything but never lost her ability to see the truth. Together, for one miraculous night, they'd saved each other in ways that would ripple forward for years to come. And that, David realized, was the real gift of that Christmas Eve. Not the shock of impossible knowledge, but the simple truth behind it. Love isn't about grand gestures or expensive presents. It's about showing up. Day after day, moment by moment. Being there, just being there.